Good afternoon, students of Walla Walla Community College. My name is John Van Slyke, and I'm an instructor here on campus. And I'm sending out this special screencast because I want to invite you along on a special intellectual journey that I'll be having with some students this next spring quarter. Some of you are still thinking about your spring class schedule. Some of you have maybe already made your decisions, but before you finalize your schedule, I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into this class, American Environmental History, History 205. It's item number 1519 in your in the e-schedule. And should you choose to come along with me on this journey or this adventure, I would be very excited to have you on board. But a little bit about this course to help you perhaps make that decision. Environmental history is sort of a special and relatively new variety of history. This is unlike any of the other courses that I teach here on campus. For one, it sort of tends toward telling the story of American history as opposed to world history, which is what most of my other courses are. But it's not just American history, it's American history with a special perspective, really told from, almost as you might imagine it, coming from animals and natural resources and trees. Meaning, how have the decisions that we as a species, Homo sapiens, how have our decisions had impact on the natural environments in which American history has carried itself out, the stage upon which we have acted throughout recent centuries. So please join me. I'm going to take you through sort of just week by week, and I will be very quick here, but want to see if this sounds like a class that might be of interest to you. So American environmental history, we can tell this is a useful course in the sense that we see things not from just a political nature, not just from an economic nature, not just from a social nature, but we try to tell the story from a natural perspective. And as you can tell by some of these images on here, what are the stories of those groups of people from societies that would not necessarily be considered classical civilization, maybe that don't have all the attributes of a truly civilized society, like this gentleman from Papua New Guinea. How about from the story of birds of prey like the eagle, from water, from our glacial ice pack on the north and the southern ends of the earth, story of rivers, oceans, so on and so forth. So we're going to try to get outside ourselves a little bit to tell the story of the past. The first week we'll spend building a framework for understanding specifically what are the kinds of questions that environmental historians ask. And we'll look at 4 environmental historians who are quite prominent in the field and look at their approach. One of the approaches will involve trying to understand how did the pre-European peoples of the American continent, how did they think about their world? How did they come to understand it, how it came into being? And this will be one example, the Hidatsa Indian tribe and one of their important creation myths. You might notice the sort of northwest art. This tribe is from not too far away along the Pacific coast. We will before long transition to telling the story of what was the world and what were the understandings of the natural world that the first Europeans who came to North America, how did the ideas that they had, many of which were rooted in scripture, about what wild places and wilderness was, the idea that it was tinged with hints of evil, that it was something that needed to be conquered or overtaken and converted into a garden, which was more consistent with the imagery of a Garden of Eden. So we'll look a little bit at the early experience of the Pilgrims. Also we'll look at the experience of the French and Spanish in other corners of America and the early European settlement of it. Not too long thereafter, we'll be looking a little bit at some of the earliest painters, landscape artists. How did the stories that they tried to tell through the images that they presented, how do they speak a little bit to the uneasy relationship that these early Europeans had with the vast wilderness and natural preserve of the Americas? We'll be able to learn how to sort of interpret paintings like this one. This is called The Oxbow by Thomas Cole. It's a painting that's actually loaded with all sorts of meaning. You can see it's part domesticated pasture and it's also part wild wilderness. What is the story that's being implied by this sort of presentation? Before I move on, we'll meet some of the great early thinkers, the transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau, and how they're coming along in the mid-19th century or in the face of America's industrialization, how their words and their philosophies, how they speak to America at a divided time, a time of ambivalence. We'll then spill out onto the Western Plain with the help of this gentleman here, Frederick Jackson Turner, who in some ways tries to tell the story of American exceptionalism. How do the ideas that Americans brought with them as they moved west impact the natural environment that they encountered and the use that they made of it? Are Americans exceptional? Is there something about the American spirit that's unique? If so, what, if anything, has made that the case? So Frederick Jackson Turner will help bring us into this really strong and impressive period of expansion that experiences things like gold rushes and cattle drives and wars against Native American tribes and reservation processes. Okay, we'll then move on to sort of the heart of the Industrial Revolution in the United States, particularly looking at the birth of the conservation and preservationist movements. And we'll understand how the early concern about America's natural environment gave way to different responses. Some people who thought land use should take place according to certain rules and philosophies, and other people who thought it should be a little different. And you might find in yourself trace aspects of either a conservation approach to our natural environment or a preservation approach to our natural environment. We'll get in touch with that and discuss that. We'll look a little bit about, even in the 20th and 21st century, what it means for young people like yourselves to get out in wilderness. What is the yearning? What is the story that seems to beckon at least certain segments of our population to go into the wild, to discover something about ourselves, maybe look for something that might be missing. I'll look forward to having that conversation with you. We will look at mid to late 20th century contributors to the environmental movement. This woman up top is Rachel Carson. How did she, as a powerful voice and a female voice in the midst of a largely male-dominated society in the mid-20th century, how did she succeed in calling attention to critical environmental challenges of her time, particularly those associated with the use of DDT, a powerful chemical, following World War II? And lastly, I'll involve you folks. You'll have a chance to explore a specific environmental event that you feel most interested in. And we'll use that to sort of help tell the story of the late 20th century and how a whole host of different environmental movements, such as environmental justice, which sought to take on the problem of what historians have termed environmental racism. How is it the places where we build toxic emissions, air pollution, water pollution, how is it that those have come to be largely located in the presence of neighborhoods of people of color, people who lack the and people of lower socioeconomic status. We'll explore that unique situation, that unique reality of our time. So in closing, again, American Environmental History with John Van Slyke. It's History 205. It's item number 1519 in the course, in the e-schedule, and it's from 10:30 to 11:20 every day. Do you want to be a part of this? These are some questions you can ask yourself. Are you curious? I love to have conversations and cater our time together in response to student questions. So can we have that conversation? I'll look forward to it. And finally, do you want to engage the minds and voices of important people like these two gentlemen standing on a mountaintop in the middle of Yosemite Valley, Teddy Roosevelt on the left and John Muir on the right? If this sounds interesting to you, I hope you'll give added thought to joining us in History 205 this spring. Good luck to you and enjoy the sunny weather that's been visited upon us. Take care.